Hello and welcome to Nasstar's Webcast Wednesday. This edition of the webcast is all about the Nasstar Prophecies, our attempt to predict the future. Today is the Recruitment edition. We're going to try and inform you guys, our audience, about what's going to happen at the course of 2017 in the recruitment industry. My name's Guy, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Nasstar PLC, and with me today is Guy Deterding, the Managing Director of Nasstar for Recruitment. Guy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Geese.
So, Guy, they say that only fools try and predict the future. What does that make us? It's well-informed fools, hopefully.
I should make absolutely no comment, I think.
You've been out there, Guy. You've been talking to lots of our customers. And when I say we're well-informed, it's because you've been out there and done the homework for this whole presentation. So thank you for that. You're actually the well-informed one. It's just me who's the fool predicting the future. Before we begin our presentation, if any of you out there do have any questions or any prophecies of your own, any predictions for the future, you're in recruitment and fancy having a punt, please just use the question button at any time during a presentation, and we'll get to those at the end for conversation. And now, without much further ado, on to our presentation. Now, Guy, you're the one who's been talking to recruitment stakeholders out there far and wide for the last month or so. What's the general outlook for 2017 feeling like to the people out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all read the papers. We all absorb the news through whichever media we choose. So we all know, I think, that globally there's a lot of stuff up in the air. Everyone's concerned, I guess, about what's happening in China and Russia. Everyone's waiting to see which Donald Trump turns up after the end of January when he's actually in the White House. And those will have significant impacts on the general economy as well as on recruitment. And clearly, we've got some big questions to answer in both Europe and the UK around the EU. For the UK, it's hard or soft Brexit. When does it happen? Concerns over the productivity gap in terms of our general economy, and what happens to interest rates and what will the impact be. So all of those things in the background are going to have a very significant effect on recruitment. The easy answer is, well, it's just going to be a great deal of change in 2017. There's no reason why it shouldn't be as surprising perhaps as 2016. And from that point of view, we all need to ensure that we're flexible. Businesses, we know in general, hate uncertainty. But I think businesses are now used to having to deal with that level of change, and I think what we saw particularly around Brexit was that a lot of businesses have just said, look, we can't go on waiting for things to settle down, so we've got a clear direction. We've just got to get on with things. So from a recruitment point of view, I think it'll continue, and potentially the speed of change will force people to do things more quickly and drive more projects. I mean, what we certainly will see is businesses failing more often and much more quickly than they have in the past.
Interesting. Uncertainty does bring risk, Guy, but as you always say, for the recruitment industry, it also creates opportunities. I remember you mentioned to me some businesses are using this as a chance to push ahead with their ambitions. They're not at all afraid of these stormy uncertainties that they see before them. And with that comes opportunities for recruitment in the legal and financial industry specifically. These guys have got lots of activity around IT projects and key support functions right now. So it makes sense for recruitment to position themselves well in those markets. Because there are some firms out there ready to brave these storms, and they see opportunity. So it's not all uncertainty and risk. There's opportunity out there too for recruitment, which is good. Well, what is for recruitment, Guy? I'm telling them what's out there for them. You should be telling us. What are you being told?
Most definitely there is opportunity. The recruiters that I've spoken to, the CEOs, MDs, owners of business, have all been pretty buoyant about, particularly about temp. As you rightly said, Geese, change particularly drives the legal, something about the legal profession that they get involved every time things go up or go down. They seem to benefit all the time. And clearly the change in terms of compliance, and we're seeing more and more push down from the government, from EU, from globally, governments driving to increase the levels of compliance, to manage tax better, to manage salaries better, to spread wealth. All of that is gonna drive projects in general. It's going to drive the financial sector, because the financial sector in particular is going to be hard hit by compliance. And yes, I think what recruiters are saying, and certainly some of the ones I've spoken to, said you need to get closer to your customers, you need to respond more quickly, you need to be there for projects, you need to be able to roll out your service globally, as well as doing things across the UK and Europe. The underlying pattern, I think recent figures have actually shown significant increases in full-time employment. I think over a year, most people don't expect that to be the case for across all 12 months. I think when you look back, people feel that it's going to be a low percentage increase in terms of permanent employment. But it's what happens in between that's important, and perhaps increasingly slim pickings in the volume market. I mean, that's becoming a very tough, very competitive market. Some businesses are avoiding it altogether. Others are making sure that they're as slick as possible, reducing their overheads, trying to manage their margins a little bit better. Key question might be: is there going to be an Uberization moment in recruitment? Who knows? These things happen very quickly. I think it's unlikely. Certainly, a number of people I've spoken to have talked about it. I think in terms of trying to anticipate where it might come from and when it'll actually happen, it's a tough one, because we've seen a lot of efforts at Uberizing recruitment, and a lot of failures. Clearly, it is about adding value. It's about getting close to your clients. Those are things that systems will find it very difficult to do. So it is key to do that, and to be as flexible as possible as a business, so that you can respond to what are effectively shifting sands, and people's view on employment is changing. They want more flexible working. They're less unhappy about loss of security. Employers are driving 0 hours. Tax compliance might be driving new employment models altogether. So as a business, as a recruitment business, you need to be flexible. You need to be able to pick these things up quickly and respond to them quickly.
I remember reading your notes around this presentation, Guy, and although you kind of saw overall employment levels staying fairly static, you saw high levels of recruitment activity expected as companies try and reshape themselves for the challenges that emerge from the uncertainty that lies ahead. And these uncertainties require new skill sets, new disciplines, new talents, and these are often brought in on a temporary basis. We're expecting to see much more of that throughout the year. Temporary, flexible working demand jobs. So that creates recruitment in itself, right?
It certainly does, absolutely. And I think more and more people are putting themselves out into that contract market. I think a lot of people who've been used to having a permanent job for a long time, that's gone as a sort of something that you can guarantee. Jobs change more quickly, and people want more flexibility, so they're more open, I think, to the offer of contracts, of project-related work. Yeah, absolutely, clients will be asking for it, and it then comes down to speed, the ability to identify people, get them in place quickly, to understand their availability, which is probably the holy grail of temp recruiters, and making sure that they can deliver that for clients when they need it.
Interesting. High levels of recruitment activity expected, just not the long-term job placements that the workforce likes. So that's a good prophecy there, Guy. Let's move on to the next one. Now, beware the snake oil and shadow. That sounds ominous, Guy. What do you mean by that?
I think, well, as you start to look at the IT piece, again, as I said, we've spoken to a number of recruiters, and I think the sort of three themes that come up again and again around technology are, that lovely term ubiquity, so being able to do everything from anywhere. Security, which is clearly in the headlines almost daily nowadays, and automation. The challenge here is that if you talk to IT service providers and say, look, I've got a business which has, let's say, an office in London, an office in Singapore, and an office in Dubai. How do I make sure they can all access what they need? How do I make sure they can access their CRM wherever they are, and whether they're on the road in Dubai or in a hotel in Singapore or whatever it is? It's very easy for service providers to say, well, yeah, no problem, stick it in Azure or Amazon or in the public cloud, and they can access it from anywhere. Well, that's true, but your data has to sit somewhere. So if your data lives in Dublin, for instance, and someone's accessing it from Hong Kong, it's going to be slow. It doesn't matter whether it's in the public cloud or not. So when I say beware of snake oil salespeople, beware of that, because they can, they will tell you that it will work, and it will work if you're prepared to wait a very long time. Practically, what we're looking at probably is more of a potentially a hybrid solution between public and private cloud. Mobility is perhaps closer, and certainly people do expect access from anywhere and from any device. Again, the challenge there is if you don't have Wi-Fi, and the good old UK is lagging significantly behind everybody else, can you still work? If I'm on a train going through a tunnel, or I'm somewhere in London that doesn't have Wi-Fi, and there are plenty of those, can I still work offline? And that's the key. So it's not just about can I work consistently over Wi-Fi. Security.
You kind of keep banging your head against 3G. Yes, it's terribly frustrating.
Yeah. And all they ever say to you is, if you wait a couple of months, we'll have 4G and 5G. You're no problem at all. But frankly, I've got to send this email now, not in a couple of months' time. So and security, we've all seen. We've seen talk. And to use an example from the recruitment industry, we've seen what's happened to quite significant businesses in recruitment. Michael Page, to name one, who spent an awful lot on IT, but still managed to lose 70,000 candidate records to an unknown third party. That sort of public embarrassment, that PR, as you know, Guy, takes many months, many years to build up. You can lose it very, very quickly, and especially when you look at sort of industries where trust is critical, like financial services. If you're a recruiter to financial services, you have one of those stories, and you're going to struggle to find new clients. So security is so critical, and you just need to avoid getting your name in the press on that one.
I think Michael Page is... they were a textbook in how not to handle these crises. It only just happened, didn't it? But they bungled it. They took 11 days to notify those affected. It caused outrage. And terrible damage to thetheir corporate brand. It was just so easily avoidable by dealing with it the right way. It's a good example.
Yeah, I think we talk as well. It wasn't so much about what happened in the first place. It was about the way they responded, and I think that's absolutely right, Guy. It's not, you can do what you can to prevent security breaches occurring, but it's never foolproof. And how you behave and what you do if and when one does occur is almost as important, so that you can at least turn around and go, look, we failed to close all the holes. Somebody got in, but we were open and honest. We did what we had to do. We made sure everybody was informed. We closed the stable door later. All of those key things, and getting those messages out and quickly is extremely important. You're right. And in talking to people, I think the third area that people really are focusing on is automation. And that's also about integrating data. So that's making sure that data is only entered once, and wherever data is entered and whoever by, it's available to all the systems that flow through your recruitment processes. And that becomes particularly important in compliance. The overheads are cranking up, in particular industries like health, construction and education. You've got to get your candidates to do as much of their own compliance as they can. Otherwise, you don't have a scalable business. Because chasing that becomes a real nightmare, and you've only got to get it wrong once. A bit similar to security, perhaps. If you're in education and you end up placing a teacher in a school who misbehaves, and it turns out that you hadn't checked their criminal records, guess whose name is going to be in the headlines? And that's really seriously bad news for everybody involved. Data protection, I'll come on to that more later, but that is really, really hotting up. 2018, the new Act is going to come into place, and you need to be ready for that. It seems a long way off. It's only just over a year away, and that's really going to be fairly demanding. So automation around that is key. And again, automation around the volume market. We spoke about vanishing margins and tough competition. You've just got to be slick in that area if you want to make money.
Yeah, I'm just reading one of the quotes here that one of your sources gave us. I'm just going to read it out, Guy. Give the audience an idea of the mentality that some market leaders have towards automation out there. IT will help us operate efficiently and in turn be able to price client work at market-leading rates. Across support functions, I envision IT replacing all admin roles with effective IT systems, allowing us to grow and support our sales function while maintaining a lean IT-led support function. Some big firms taking automation very seriously out there. They see it as an edge, one that will give them a competitive advantage over everyone else in the market. So it's not just a question of doing it now, it's a question of catching up with those that are doing it now, Guy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's not just about competition, it's not just about beating the others in price terms or in overhead reduction. It's also in delivering that level of service, and that is key. And when you look at the candidates of today, the Y2K, the Generation Z, whatever they're now called, I'm starting to show my age and creak at the edges there. They expect to have slick service. They expect it all to be via their mobiles, and they expect to be able to communicate with a recruiter in the way that they choose. So you need to be slick at that too.
Yeah, they expect a decent user experience. That's what they want these days, I guess, and it needs to be looking the part as well. The practical approach, Guy, we've heard lots of different kind of high-level strategies for dealing with the uncertainty. What's the practical approach in 2017?
I touched on one or two of these already. As we mentioned it with the snake oil sales folk, the public cloud is genuinely there now. There are models where the public cloud becomes practically useful to recruiters. So, for instance, using Microsoft, you can do all your security, your ID security management in the cloud, and that's genuinely there. That works. That includes things like dual factor authentication, and things like facial recognition coming to a PC or a mobile near you. So it's not just about passwords, which we know are fundamentally flawed. But as I mentioned before, latency is the key. When it comes to sharing a CRM globally, for instance, it doesn't matter which bit of the public cloud you use, but latency is always going to be a problem if you've got people in China accessing a CRM in Dublin. So practically, you need to be very aware of those challenges and make sure that whoever your provider is also aware of those challenges and is open about what that means for your consultants. Mobility, one of the people we spoke to described it as the most exciting development and technological advancement for recruiters. It's been around a long time. It's a lot better than it used to be. Certainly expectations among consultants are much higher. As I mentioned before, it is important to understand how and if it works if there is no Wi-Fi. So you need that backup for genuine offline capability. On the security side, it is a big challenge, and there is no universal panacea. What you can do as a business, and what you should do as a business, is ensure that you and your suppliers are adopting technical best practice, and there are a lot of tools out there now which can absolutely help you to nail down security, and it becomes quite intricate in terms of it's not just about who you allow access to what, but it's what you allow them to do with it once they've got it. So it's not just saying, I'll give these people access to this data. They can have access to these documents, but they can't print them, or they can't copy them, or they can't do it. They can only look at them, and you can really kind of nail that down. Security technology has now got to the point where it will spot unusual patterns. So it might even say, Guy, that it appears that you are logging on from Dubai, and yet your diary says that you're in a meeting in Singapore. So it can flag that up, and it can report that back. So it may well be your diary's not up to date, but at least people are aware that there is a potential breach.
Yes.
And with security, as always, there is one very weak link, which is something that technology struggles to do anything about, and that's people.
Nobody talks about it either, do you? That social engineering. It seems to be nobody wants to take responsibility for being that weakest link in the security chain. I remember you telling me, was it your nephew or your brother-in-law worked for a big finance house? They get trained regularly on social engineering because it is seen and recognised as the weakest link in the security chain.
It is, Geese, and yes, I mean my nephew works in the sort of personal client finance area, and he says that he gets 4 or 5 phone calls every day from people purporting to be somebody they're not. So that might be from somebody who says, I'm in the IT department, can you give me your password? Or it might be from somebody who says they're a client and they're not, and they're just fishing for information. And they are seriously trained on a monthly basis to ensure that they pick up these things and don't respond. And being the financial sector, the tendency is if you fail, then you're given a black bag and told to take your belongings somewhere else. And that's it's not restricted to financial services. We had 2 of our clients yesterday opened an email from Poland, which was clearly nothing to do with them. It would just said something like invoice in the subject line, and as soon as they opened it, it started to effectively destroy their personal file folders, and they need to take some responsibility for that, and they need to make sure that they're not opening the door. So yeah, training your people, making sure that you've got a good security policy in place, make sure that people are aware of what their own responsibilities are. As you say, Geese, it's an area that's not talked about, and yet it's probably the biggest weakness that most of us have.
And the criminals are taking advantage of this. Small businesses everywhere, not just in recruitment, are getting hit by these cyber criminals. It's a huge issue. It's a huge Western civilization issue for any business out there, social engineering. So that's something we're going to cover in the future a lot more.
It's a huge issue, and it's a huge industry. People make money out of it, serious money. So yeah, and it's going to increase. And the other key area is around automation, as we've said. It's about nailing compliance and getting it right consistently every time, ensuring your business is scalable by making sure that as much as possible is automated, so you're not throwing extra overhead at it. It's not easy. Automation, looking at workflow, integrating systems, it isn't easy. It's hard work, but it is rewarding in that it delivers genuine cost improvements and service improvements. So it's a key area.
What are the top recruitment firms thinking about? We had a whole bunch of quotes. Only the best made it into this presentation. You summarise these quotes for the audience, Guy. What are the key subjects they're thinking about?
Yeah, I can. I mean, what this slide is attempting to do is say, look, if you are a recruitment business, what should your IT plans be for 2017? And one of the sort of I suppose quotes that was closest to the mark, particularly around integration, is there on the right. Our CRM should be regarded as our core system. All other systems should integrate and add value to the CRM and delivery. For most recruitment businesses, their CRM is still their golden goose. Not so much as it used to be, and lots of information is out there on LinkedIn, but it's not the LinkedIn information you're interested in. It's the quality of the relationship with a client or with a candidate, and if that is encapsulated in the CRM, then that has to be central. So yeah, I mean, that quote, as I say, sums it up. It's about making sure that all your systems feed in and link into your CRM and your communication. So if you're communicating with a client, whether that's by phone or text or email, then all of that is reflected in your CRM. Otherwise, you haven't got a handle on the relationship that you have. Down the left-hand side there, I've just identified some of the sort of key areas which sums up what we've been talking about, Guy. Public cloud, by all means, and it has a place, but possibly not on its own. You should be talking to vendors about hybrid solutions to make sure that you're getting what you need and that it fits your business. Mobility, recruiters, or the recruitment industry has a bit of a challenge here because a lot of recruiters are very keen not to allow data to creep out of their organization for very understandable reasons. But most of the people they employ now expect to be able to work wherever they are using their own mobile. So that's a bit of a dichotomy, but the technology is there to allow them to do that and to give the recruitment business the control they need to make sure that data is not going AWOL or being used for the wrong reasons. So those are key areas to look at. Security we've sort of talked about, and the integration, which is summed up in that quote I was talking about earlier. So it's about integrating your comms so that it doesn't matter how you communicate, you're tracking that conversation. Linking to portals, that's about ensuring that your candidates are doing most of the work, and that's, if you've got 70,000 candidates as a recruiter, and you've got, let's say, 100 or 80 consultants, that's a lot of candidates to look after. You want the candidate to do as much work as possible. And providing with portals does that, and it also provides them with the best quality service. They can go onto your portal, they can provide a copy of their passport, they can also find a job, they can also tell you when they're going to be available. All absolutely critical information for you. Integrated systems is critical to ensuring you've got automation, you've got compliance, you've got consistency, you've got good service. And I think that final point at the bottom underpins everything in that ensuring you are flexible as a business, that you're not committing yourselves to long-term contracts, that you have systems that can respond to change is so key, because change it will, and if you don't change with it, then you may not be here when we do next year's presentation.
It's a nice way you've ended the presentation there, Guy, with a quote from Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest that survives, it's the ones most adaptable to change. And in the face of all this uncertainty, I think that's never been more accurate when it pertains to any kind of business out there.
Absolutely, never more true.
Now, questions and prophecies time. Sadly, we've had no prophecies, Guy, but we've had a couple of questions. One of them, how do we know what snake oil is and what isn't? That's a good one. It's all very well saying you have to make sure they've got the underlying infrastructure to deliver low levels of latency, Guy. But what does a small recruitment outfit have to do to make sure they're not dealing with snake oil merchants?
Well, you make sure that your vendors are open and honest. That's an easy answer, isn't it? I think it's important to talk to more than one potential vendor. Don't believe everything you hear. Definitely talk to them about references. And if you can, probably the best way to find a reference is if you can find somebody that uses that vendor already, that they don't provide you with as a reference, because references, as we know, tend to be people that they're very chummy with, and will probably give you a rosy tint. So if you can find a reference for a vendor that you're going to work with, that they don't know you're taking, if it's a mate in recruitment's a small world, it's always an option, or maybe an option to have a chat on social media, find out if anyone else is using them, and find out from somebody who's actually drinking the snake oil as whether it really does what you need or not. Talk to vendors who provide independent advice. There are people out there who aren't necessarily flogging it, but can at least tell you which questions to ask, because that's always key. And once a vendor understands that you've got that level of knowledge and you know which questions to ask, then they've got to be a bit more honest about what they deliver.
Understood. Next question for you, Guy, is a bit short. What new tools? So I guess the context behind this is everyone knows these new tools are becoming essential. How do you? What new tool do you choose? I guess that question is asking, how would Nasstar Recruitment choose a new technology? An automation technology, a security technology for a customer. How do you choose amongst all these tools that are out there? What new tool was the question?
Well, that's a pretty how long is a piece of string question, but yes. I mean, so for instance, if you were looking for a new workflow tool, there are lots of workflow tools out there. A lot of them are quite complex and quite expensive. If you're a big business, that might be worth doing. If you're a small business and you want to be able to maybe maintain it to an extent yourself, or make the changes yourself, then you might end up needing to choose a tool that is, one, cheaper, maybe has less capability, but at least fits your business better. So don't just think about what you're doing now. Think about the fact, particularly if you're choosing workflow, it's all about the flexibility. Think about the fact you're going to need to make changes in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Are you going to go back to the vendor and pay them for that? So think about the sort of whole process, not just the initial rollout. In terms of tools that recruiters are looking at the moment, people always love to be able to scrape information off LinkedIn. There are plenty of CRMs now that are allowing you to do that. Mobile, clearly for candidates, there are plenty of tools out there now which allow you to, for instance, use a mobile to clock in. So as a temp, you can you use the mobile to identify their location, and when they're on site, their timesheet for the day starts, and when they leave site, their timesheet for the day ends. It's quite difficult for them to lie about it if they've got their mobile and they're in the pub down the road and telling you they're still working. So there's some quite slick stuff like that, and also, you know, those same mobiles do facial recognition. I work with one education recruiter, and it's a bit like the wrong taxi driver doing their you know, passing their license. It has happened whereby people will be given a job as a supply teacher, and they actually send somebody else. So that's pretty critical in terms of compliance. Yeah. So you've done all the criminal checks on John Brown, and you find that Steve Jones has turned up. And of course the school don't know the difference between Steve Jones and John Brown. So you know, facial recognition can help you nail down that side of compliance as well. There's some interesting stuff out there. And you know, if you're choosing, again, pick an independent advisor who knows the market, who can save you a great deal of time, because there are lots of options out there, and going through every single option will take you a lot of effort, and you're a recruiter at the end of the day. That's what you want to be doing. Look for an independent advisor who's got you know, no skin in the game apart from giving you advice, and somebody who's got that level of experience and can get their heads around your business and understand what will fit you.
Good stuff. That's the end of our questions, Guy. I think you probably answered that one. How long is a piece of string indeed? There's a whole different bunch of different kinds of tools out there. Some focused on very specific niche recruitment cases, but it really does depend on your organization, the size, the complexity, and the kind of recruitment you're involved in. So I think we've answered that question. Unless anybody has any further questions, we'll wrap our presentation up, Guy.
I do have a question. What should a recruitment business be doing in 2017 to maximize flexibility?
I'll let Guy take that one.
Well, I sort of touched on it earlier, but I think now one of the biggest mistakes we see is people signing long contracts. So you know, we've seen lots of recruiters who've signed up, for instance, 5-year telephony contracts, and then a year later they want to move, or they want to change the way they do their telephony, or they want to downsize, or they want to upsize, and they're stuck with something that's wrapped around their neck for 5 years. Printers is another one. People sign printer contracts for 5 years. And you think, why do you do it? Because it's not necessary anymore. There are plenty of suppliers out there who will do 1-year contracts or even rolling contracts. And that's what a lot of the CRM boys do. And that gives you the capability to make a judgment, to change direction as and when your business needs it, rather than when suppliers dictate. So that's the obvious one. I think one of the things we talked about as well earlier was make sure that you're location independent. So the ability to access your systems from anywhere, making sure that your systems are available via the cloud. Then if you have to leave an office, people can work from home. If you have to leave an office because you're moving offices, in the short term, you've still got that accessibility. That's key. Keep your overhead costs low, and drive up automation to make your business scalable. So if you get a nice big new juicy contract, that's great, but you don't want all the costs that come with it. So if you've got automation, you should be cranking up your margins as a result. So those would be the key wins, I think.
Good stuff. I know you had questions your side from people you spoke to. Anything else we should have covered and we haven't? Well, good stuff. Special thanks to all those customers who took the time out to have a conversation with Guy and embark with us on our fool's mission of predicting the future. We'll be back next year at the same time to see if these prophecies came true. But special thanks out there to the customers whose logos we have on screen. If you arrived late or you wanted to rewatch this presentation, we're going to publish it over on our blog, thenassarian.com. You can head over there. There's a full written article that accompanies this video that Guy's written himself with much more detail and content. So do look out for that, and do head over there shortly if you want to catch this presentation again. Thank you so much for your time today and all of your contributions. If anybody does have any further questions, you can always reach out to us. Contact details on screen. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. Hopefully, we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you so much for your time today. Guy, thank you.
Thank you, Geese.
And everyone, take care. Bye-bye for now.